Madison Taylor was 34 when she met Amir Hassan at a digital marketing conference in Los Angeles. She was a successful entrepreneur, owner of an advertising agency that served Silicon Valley startups, and he introduced himself as an international investment consultant focused on the Middle East. What began as a professional conversation about market opportunities quickly turned into something more intimate. Amir was 42 years old, spoke English with an accent he claimed was Lebanese, and had a magnetic presence that drew attention in any setting. He wore expensive suits, drove a shiny black BMW, and always paid the bills without hesitation. For Madison, who had come out of a difficult relationship 6 months earlier, Amir represented everything she thought she was looking for: sophistication, financial stability, and an international perspective that matched her business ambitions. In the first few weeks, Amir courted her intensely and romantically. Flowers arrived at her office every day, always accompanied by handwritten cards with poetic messages about how she had changed his life. Dinners at exclusive Beverly Hills restaurants were followed by walks on the Santa Monica beach, where he talked about his dreams of expanding his business to the United States and how Madison would be the perfect partner for this venture. What impressed Madison most was Amir's apparent openness about his life. He showed her photos of his family in Lebanon, talked about his mother who was ill and needed expensive medical care, and explained how his investments in Dubai had grown exponentially in recent years. Madison, who had always been cautious about relationships, found in Amir someone who seemed transparent and direct about his intentions. 3 months after their first date, during a weekend in Napa Valley, Amir proposed to Madison. The proposal was elaborate: a private dinner at a historic winery, live violinists, and a diamond ring that he said he had personally chosen from the best jewelers in Dubai. Madison was thrilled, but a small part of her practical mind questioned the speed of events. "Isn't this too fast?" she asked that night as she admired the ring on her finger. "When you find the right person, time doesn't matter," Amir replied, kissing her forehead. "My culture values quick decisions when it comes to matters of the heart. Besides, the longer we wait, the more time we lose to build our life together." Madison convinced herself that her hesitation was just fear of committing again. After all, Amir had proven himself to be thoughtful, respectful, and genuinely interested in her professional dreams. He never pressured her about money, never asked to borrow any, and always insisted on paying for all of the couple's expenses. The wedding preparations were quick. Amir suggested a simple ceremony in Las Vegas, followed by an extravagant honeymoon. "I want our first trip as husband and wife to be special," he said. "Dubai is the city of the future where I plan to expand my business. It will be perfect for us to start our new life." Madison initially resisted the idea of Dubai, preferring more traditional destinations like France or Italy, but Amir was persuasive. He showed her stunning photos of luxury hotels, talked about unique experiences in the desert, and promised it would be an adventure she would never forget. "Besides," he added, "I have important meetings with local investors. We can combine business with pleasure." The ceremony in Las Vegas took place in an elegant chapel with only a few witnesses. Madison wore a simple but beautiful dress, and Amir looked impeccable in a black tuxedo. During the ceremony, he held her hands firmly and looked into her eyes with an intensity that made her feel like the most loved woman in the world. After the wedding, they went for a romantic dinner at a restaurant on top of one of the most exclusive hotels in the city. Amir was particularly attentive, constantly taking photos and posting some on social media with affectionate captions about his perfect wife and new life together. The next morning, as they packed their bags for Dubai, Amir casually mentioned that he would need to leave a day early because of an urgent meeting that had come up. "It's $1 million opportunity," he explained. "I can't miss it. You don't mind traveling alone the next day, do you? I've already arranged everything. Airport transfer, hotel check-in, everything." Madison felt a pang of disappointment, but she understood. Business was business, and she herself had had to make similar adjustments in her career. "Of course," she replied. "One day won't make a difference. At least I'll be well rested for our honeymoon." Amir seemed relieved by her understanding. He kissed her long and hard and murmured, "That's why I love you so much. You understand that sometimes we have to make sacrifices for our future." At the airport, Amir said goodbye to Madison with an emotional intensity that she found touching, but slightly strange. He hugged her for several minutes, repeating how much he loved her and how eager he was to show her Dubai. "Remember," he said, "when you get there, only use the contacts I gave you. Dubai can be confusing for tourists, but my friends will take care of you." Madison laughed at his concern. "I've traveled alone to dozens of countries," she reminded him. "I think I can manage in Dubai for a few hours until you arrive at the hotel." But Amir insisted, "Please, Madison, for my peace of mind, only use the numbers in your phone. If you have any problems or questions, call Hassan. He's my cousin and knows the city like no one else." The next day, Madison boarded her Emirates flight to Dubai. It was her first international flight alone as a married woman, and she felt excited about the adventure that awaited her. During the 14-hour trip, she read guidebooks about Dubai, made plans about the places she wanted to visit with Amir, and imagined what it would be like to work with him on expanding his business to the United States. What Madison didn't know was that at that very moment, Amir Hassan was not at any business meeting in Dubai. In fact, he was in an apartment in Long Beach, California, carefully counting the $50,000 he had transferred from Madison's business account the previous morning, right after she had added his name as an authorized signatory for the company, a standard procedure for couples who work together, as he had explained. As Madison's plane crossed the Pacific Ocean toward the Middle East, Amir was already planning his next identity, his next victim, and his next honeymoon that would never happen. Dubai International Airport was even more impressive than Madison had imagined. Glass and steel structures stretched in every direction, with dancing water fountains and luxury shops that rivaled the best avenues in Beverly Hills. After a 14-hour flight, she felt tired but excited to finally begin her honeymoon. Following Amir's instructions, Madison looked for a man holding a sign with her name on it in the arrivals area. It took a few minutes before she spotted a thin, middle-aged driver wearing a plain white shirt and holding a piece of paper with Mrs. Hassan written in messy handwriting. The first oddity struck Madison at that moment. Amir had said someone would be waiting for her, but he hadn't mentioned that they would be using his last name. She hadn't yet decided whether she would change her name after the wedding, and she certainly hadn't communicated that decision to anyone. But maybe it was just a cultural misunderstanding, she thought, approaching the driver. "Hello? I'm Madison Taylor," she said in English, pointing to the sign. The man looked at her confused for a few seconds before responding in broken English. "Ah, yes, Mrs. Hassan. I am Khalil. Mr. Amir sent me to pick you up." During the drive to the hotel, Madison tried to chat with Khalil, asking about the best places to visit in Dubai and when Amir would arrive. The answers were vague and evasive. Khalil didn't seem to know much about Amir's plans, which was strange considering that they were supposedly close enough for Amir to entrust him with the task of picking up his wife at the airport. "Mr. Amir doesn't talk much about business," Khalil said when Madison asked about the meetings that kept her husband busy. "He's a very private man." The hotel was indeed luxurious, as Amir had promised. The Burj Al Arab rose majestically against the blue sky of Dubai, its sail-shaped architecture creating an iconic silhouette that Madison had seen in countless photos. In the lobby, everything was gold and opulent, with attentive staff dressed impeccably. At the reception desk, Madison presented her passport and mentioned that the reservation was under the name Amir Hassan. The receptionist, an elegant Filipino woman, checked the system for several minutes before frowning slightly. "I'm sorry, ma'am, but I can't find any reservation under that name for the dates you mentioned," she said politely. "Perhaps it's under another name?" Madison felt a chill in her stomach. "Try Madison Taylor," she suggested, trying to remain calm. After a few more checks, the receptionist shook her head. "Unfortunately, we don't have any reservations for those dates, but we can check availability if you'd like to make a reservation now." Madison's confusion quickly turned to concern. She called Amir's number, but it went straight to voicemail. She tried again several times, always with the same result. It was as if his phone was turned off or out of range. Remembering Amir's instructions, Madison looked up the number for Hassan, the cousin who was supposed to help her if there were any problems. When she finally got through, the voice on the other end didn't speak English fluently and seemed genuinely confused when she mentioned Amir's name. "Amir Hassan." "I don't know any Amir Hassan," said the man on the other end of the line. "You have the wrong number." Madison checked the number 3 times before trying again. The result was the same. The person on the other end of the line insisted that he didn't know any Amir Hassan and that he was definitely not her cousin. Alone in the lobby of one of the most expensive hotels in the world, Madison began to feel the first real taste of panic. She opened her wallet to check her credit cards and discovered that her main bank account was blocked. A quick call to the bank in the United States revealed that a large transfer had been made the previous morning, depleting most of her available funds. "The transfer was authorized by the account attorney, Mr. Amir Hassan," explained the bank employee. "All security procedures were followed correctly." Madison remembered the paperwork she had signed days before the wedding. Amir had explained that it was necessary so they could work together in his business, a legal formality for couples planning to go into business together. At the time, it had seemed romantic and practical. Now, she realized the terrible reality of the situation. With only the money in her wallet and a low-limit credit card, Madison couldn't afford even one night at the Burj Al Arab. She asked the receptionist to recommend a more affordable hotel, and with a heavy heart took a taxi to a modest establishment in the city center. During the ride, Madison tried to process what was happening. The pieces of the puzzle were beginning to fit together in a frightening way. Amir's insistence that she travel alone, the phone numbers that didn't work, the non-existent hotel reservation, the money missing from her account. At the budget hotel where she got a room, Madison spent the night awake, obsessively calling Amir's number and trying to understand how she could have been so naive. Each unanswered call confirmed her worst suspicions. For the first time since she had met Amir, she allowed herself to admit that perhaps she didn't know him at all. The next morning, Madison tried a different approach. She called her assistant in Los Angeles and asked her to discreetly check on Amir Hassan. What she found left her cold. "Madison, I searched every database I could access," said Jenny, her assistant, in a worried voice. "I found no record of a business owned by Amir Hassan in Los Angeles or anywhere in California. No consulting firm, no business license, nothing. It's as if he doesn't exist professionally." Reality finally hit Madison with full force. She wasn't on a honeymoon in Dubai. She was alone in a foreign country, with no money, no real contacts, and apparently married to a man who had elaborately orchestrated her financial ruin. Worst of all was the growing realization that every moment of her relationship had been a carefully constructed lie. As she looked out the small window of her cheap hotel room onto the busy streets of Dubai, Madison realized that her real struggle was just beginning. She needed to find out who Amir Hassan really was, why he had chosen her as his victim, and most importantly, how to get out of this situation before things got even worse. What she didn't know was that her absence had already been noticed by people who had been looking for her for longer than she realized. While Madison struggled to understand her situation in Dubai, on the other side of the world, in an FBI office in Los Angeles, Special Agent Carmen Rodriguez was comparing photographs on her desk. One showed Madison and Amir at their wedding in Las Vegas, posted on social media just 4 days earlier. The other was a criminal file photo of a man named Omar Nazir, wanted for marriage fraud in 3 different states. It was the same person. "We finally got him," Carmen whispered to her partner, Agent David Chen, who was analyzing documents scattered across a table full of evidence. "This son of a bitch finally slipped up." The investigation into Omar Nazir, who used dozens of fake identities, including Amir Hassan, had begun 2 years earlier when Jennifer Walsh, a 58-year-old widow from Portland, reported losing $200,000 to a man she had met on a dating app. Jennifer had believed she was financing the expansion of her future husband's business in the Middle East. Instead, she had paid for the luxurious lifestyle Omar maintained while simultaneously courting 3 other women in different cities. Carmen specialized in international romance crimes and knew that cases like this were much more common than people realized. "Predators like Omar are extremely methodical," she explained to David as they organized the dossier. "They study their victims for months before making first contact. Madison Taylor was not a random choice." The investigation had revealed that Omar had a specific pattern. Professionally successful women, between 30 and 45 years old, who had recently gone through significant relationship breakups and who owned their own businesses with substantial liquid assets. He found them through professional conferences, networking events, or premium dating apps. "Look at this," David said, pointing to a spreadsheet on the computer. "He has a rotation system. While he's in the conquest phase with one victim, he's keeping in casual contact with 2 or 3 others. When one source of money runs dry, he already has the next one lined up." What impressed investigators most was the sophistication of Omar's operation. He had created complete false identities, including fake credit histories, elaborate social media presences that went back years, and even fake professional references that confirmed his stories when victims did basic checks. Carmen had discovered that Omar worked with a small but efficient network. Khalil, the driver who had picked Madison up at the airport, was actually an accomplice paid to play specific roles in the scams. The investors in Dubai were actors hired to confirm Omar's stories during occasional phone calls with the victims. "The most disturbing part," Carmen explained as she reviewed statements from previous victims, "is that he genuinely seems to enjoy the psychological game. Former victims report that he showed genuine affection, at least in the beginning. It's not just about money for him. It's about power and control." The dossier showed that Omar had grown up in a middle-class family in Michigan, the son of legitimate Lebanese immigrants. He had served in the army for 3 years and then worked in car sales before discovering he had a natural talent for emotional manipulation. His first scam had been relatively small, convincing a coworker to lend him $5,000 for a family emergency. By the time she discovered the story was false, Omar had already disappeared. "The pattern escalated quickly," Carmen continued. "Within 5 years, he went from small loans to elaborate marriage scams involving hundreds of thousands of dollars." Madison's situation was particularly troubling because she had been sent to Dubai, something Omar had never done before with other victims. Carmen suspected that this indicated a dangerous evolution in his methods, possibly involving human trafficking or other forms of exploitation. "We have to find her before it's too late," David said, studying the map of Dubai on the wall. "If he sent her there, it's because he has something specific planned." Through international contacts, the FBI had managed to track Madison's flight to Dubai and confirm her arrival at the airport. However, after she left the airport, the trail went cold. The luxury hotel where she was supposed to be staying had no record of her reservation, and the contact numbers Omar had given her were all fake or disconnected. Carmen was particularly frustrated because she knew Madison was probably beginning to realize she had been deceived, but without knowing she was under federal investigation or that help was on the way. Women like Madison are strong and smart, Carmen reflected. She'll try to figure this out on her own, but that could put her in even greater danger. The FBI team had managed to locate Omar in Long Beach through bank surveillance. Transfers from Madison's account had been traced to an account he controlled, and security cameras had caught him withdrawing cash from several ATMs. He was being monitored 24 hours a day, but agents had not yet made the arrest because they needed him to locate Madison. "He's acting differently this time," David noted, analyzing surveillance reports. "Normally, after draining the victim's accounts, he disappears immediately and assumes a new identity. But he's staying in the Los Angeles area, as if he's waiting for something." Carmen agreed that Omar's behavior was atypical and worrisome. He may be planning something bigger with Madison. Maybe he has buyers waiting in Dubai, or maybe it's part of a larger trafficking operation. But what the agents didn't know was that Omar was obsessively monitoring Madison's banking and credit card activities through apps he had secretly installed on her phone during their relationship. He knew exactly where she was staying in Dubai and was coordinating the next step in a plan that went far beyond simple financial fraud. While Carmen worked to obtain authorization for an urgent international operation, Madison was discovering on her own that her situation was even more dangerous than she had imagined. In her desperate search for answers, she was about to encounter others who were also looking for Omar Nazir, but for much darker reasons. Madison had spent 3 nights in Dubai trying to understand her situation when she decided to do something that would completely change her perspective on what was happening. Frustrated by the lack of answers and desperate for any clue as to who Amir really was, she created a fake social media profile and began searching for other women who might have interacted with him. What she discovered left her in shock. Through a careful search of the photos Amir had posted during their relationship, Madison was able to identify some specific locations in Los Angeles where they had dined. Using hashtags from these restaurants, she began searching for other women who might have been in the same places on similar dates. That's how she found Rebecca Morrison. Rebecca, a 41-year-old plastic surgeon from San Diego, had posted a photo at the same Beverly Hills restaurant just 2 weeks before Madison met Amir. In the photo, Rebecca was sitting at a table with a man who, although photographed in profile, was unmistakably the same person Madison knew as Amir Hassan. Madison created a fake account and sent a careful message to Rebecca, pretending to be an investigative journalist researching marriage scams. To her surprise, Rebecca responded immediately and urgently. "My God, were you also a victim of his?" was Rebecca's first question when they got to talk on the phone. "I was starting to think I was the only person stupid enough to fall for it." The ensuing conversation revealed disturbing details. Rebecca had met Omar, who called himself David Martinez, at a medical conference 6 months earlier. His story had been almost identical: international investment consultant, opportunities in the Middle East, sick family in need of expensive medical help. "He proposed to me after 2 months, Rebecca explained bitterly. "He said we needed to get married quickly because of visa issues to work in Dubai. I transferred $80,000 to a joint investment account a week before the wedding." And did the wedding happen?" Madison asked, her heart racing. "No. 3 days before the scheduled date, he said his mother had died and he needed to travel urgently to Lebanon. That was the last time I saw him." Madison felt nauseous. Omar's operation was much more extensive and calculated than she had imagined, but Rebecca had more information. After he disappeared, I hired a private investigator, Rebecca continued. That's how I found out that there are at least 5 other women who've gone through the same thing in the last 2 years. The investigator found a pattern. He targets successful professional women, always with the same story about business in Dubai. Rebecca gave Madison the contact information for the private investigator, James Wright, who had specialized in Omar's case after representing multiple victims. When Madison called him, Wright was already expecting her call. Rebecca told me you would probably be in touch, Wright said wearily. I can tell from your accent that you're calling long distance. You're in Dubai, aren't you? The question made Madison freeze. How do you know? Because you're the first one he actually sent there. The other victims lost money but stayed in the United States. Your situation is different and that worries me greatly. Wright explained that he had been tracking Omar for 14 months and had identified an evolving pattern in his crimes. The first victims lost between $20,000 and $50,000 each. They were relatively simple scams. He would marry or promise to marry them, drain their accounts, and disappear. But in the last 6 months, the pattern has changed, Wright continued. He has started gathering much more detailed information about his victims, families, friends, work routines, even medical records. And now, for the first time, he has sent someone out of the country. Madison felt a chill run down her spine. What do you think that means? Honestly, I think he's working for someone bigger. Dubai is a hub for many types of international crime. Human trafficking, money laundering, passport operations. It's possible that you've been sold to another operation. The call with Wright revealed even more frightening details. Through his investigation, he had discovered that Omar kept detailed files on each victim, including information he could not have obtained through casual conversation. This suggested that he had access to private databases or was working with other criminals who specialized in obtaining personal information. Madison, I need to be blunt with you, Wright said. You're in real danger. If my theory is correct, Omar wasn't just stealing your money. He was setting you up for something much worse. Wright had tried to work with the FBI, but said the federal investigation was moving slowly due to the international nature of the case. They know about Omar, but they don't know you're in Dubai. They still think you're in the United States. Madison realized she needed to act quickly. Wright advised her to immediately seek out the American consulate in Dubai and report her situation. Don't try to handle this on your own, he warned. If you're right about being tracked, any false move could alert them that you've discovered the truth. After hanging up, Madison sat in her cheap hotel room, trying to process the magnitude of the situation. She wasn't just the victim of marriage fraud. It was possible that she was part of an international trafficking operation, and people she had never met were monitoring her every move. Staring at her phone, Madison suddenly realized something terrifying. If Omar had indeed installed tracking software on her device, he knew exactly where she was, who she had spoken to, and perhaps even the content of her conversations. At that moment, her situation was no longer about lost money. It became a matter of survival. 3 blocks away, in a public internet cafe, a man wearing sunglasses and a cap was reading real-time transcripts of every phone call Madison had made in the last 48 hours. He picked up a satellite phone and dialed an international number. She found out about the others, he said in Arabic. We have to speed up the schedule. Madison knew she had only a narrow window of time before her watchers realized she had discovered the truth. With trembling hands, she turned off her phone completely and removed the battery, remembering movies where she had seen this technique used to avoid tracking. Every second was crucial now. She needed to leave the hotel immediately, but she couldn't appear suspicious. Madison quickly packed her bags, leaving a few items scattered around the room to suggest she would be returning. and went down to the front desk with as casual a demeanor as she could muster. "I'm going to visit some tourist sites today," she said to the receptionist, forcing a smile. "I'll probably be back late tonight." The receptionist nodded politely, unaware that he was the last person to see Madison at that hotel. On the street, Madison took 3 different taxis, changing directions several times to try to confuse anyone who might be following her. Her experience in business travel was finally coming in handy in a way she had never imagined. She knew the basic counter-surveillance tactics she had learned in corporate security seminars. Her first destination was the American consulate. During the ride in the 3rd taxi, Madison kept her eyes fixed on the rearview mirror, looking for cars that might be following the same route. She noticed a silver sedan that seemed to have made the same turns as them, but she couldn't be sure. The American consulate in Dubai was a modern, secure building with multiple layers of security. Madison felt momentarily relieved as she passed through the metal detectors and entered the protected area. She was finally on technically American soil. The consular officer who attended to her, Thomas Bradley, was a middle-aged man with experience in emergency situations involving American citizens. When Madison explained her situation, he immediately recognized the seriousness of the case. "Ms. Taylor, we need to contact the American authorities immediately," Bradley said after hearing her story. "What you are describing sounds like an international trafficking operation, and Dubai cooperates extensively with the United States on these types of investigations." Bradley made several phone calls while Madison waited in a secure room. During that time, she finally allowed herself to fully process the terror of the situation. In the last 72 hours, her life had transformed from a romantic honeymoon into a nightmare of survival. 40 minutes later, Bradley returned with news that was both relief and alarm. "Madison, the FBI in the United States was already looking for you," he explained. "There is an ongoing federal investigation into the man you know as Amir Hassan. His real name is Omar Nazir, and he's wanted for multiple frauds, but the situation is more serious than we thought." Bradley explained that the FBI had managed to track Omar's financial activities and discovered that he had received $200,000 from a source in Dubai 2 days after Madison's wedding. The payment had been made by an organization that authorities suspected was involved in human trafficking. "You weren't just robbed, Madison, you were sold." The reality of that statement hit Madison like a punch in the stomach. She wasn't just a victim of romantic fraud. She was human merchandise that had been delivered to international buyers. "What happens now?" she asked, trying to maintain her composure. "We have a plan to get you out of the country safely," Bradley said. "But first, we need to coordinate with local authorities to capture the people who are involved in the operation here in Dubai." What Madison didn't know was that, at that very moment across town, an urgent meeting was taking place in a warehouse in the industrial suburbs of Dubai. 3 men were arguing animatedly in Arabic, occasionally switching to English when they referred to her. "The American found out about the other victims," said Khalil, the same man who had picked Madison up at the airport. She spoke to the private investigator in the United States. "We know because we intercepted all her calls." An older man, clearly the leader of the local operation, slammed his fist on the table. "Omar assured us this would be clean and simple, a lost tourist. No connections, no suspicions. Now we have the American authorities involved." "What do we do with her?" asked the 3rd man. "We switch to Plan B," replied the leader. "If we can't discreetly deliver her to the buyers in Karachi, we'll have to eliminate the problem before it gets bigger." Meanwhile, at the consulate, Bradley was coordinating with a joint team from the FBI and Dubai police. Agent Carmen Rodriguez had flown in overnight and was participating in the operation via video conference. "Madison, you were incredibly brave to uncover all this on your own," Carmen said across the screen. "But now we need to use you as bait to capture the entire network." The plan was risky but necessary. Madison would return to the streets of Dubai, seemingly alone, but in fact surrounded by an international surveillance team. The goal was to force the traffickers to move, allowing authorities to identify and capture everyone involved. "I'm not going to lie to you," Carmen said. "There is real risk. These people have killed before when they felt threatened, but it's our only chance to dismantle the operation and save other women who may be headed for the same fate." Madison thought of Rebecca, the other 5 victims the investigator had mentioned, and the women who could be Omar's next targets. She knew she couldn't just run away and let the operation continue. "I'll do it," she said, surprising herself with the firmness in her voice. "But I want guarantees that you'll arrest Omar too. He can't keep doing this to other women." "Omar is being arrested right now in Los Angeles," Carmen informed her. "We have enough evidence to convict him of multiple frauds. Now we need to capture his partners in Dubai." At 6 p.m., Madison left the American consulate carrying a small transmitter hidden in her bag and with an invisible security team coordinating her every move. She headed to the hotel where she had originally stayed, following specific instructions to give the traffickers the impression that she was still unaware of the true situation. As she walked through the busy streets of Dubai, Madison knew that the next few hours would determine not only her own survival, but the fate of many other women who could become victims of the same criminal network. What she didn't expect was to discover that Omar had left one final surprise for her, one that would test her courage beyond any limits she thought she possessed. Madison had been walking for 2 hours through the streets of Dubai when she received a call from an unknown number. Following the instructions of the security team, she answered while the agents monitored every word through the hidden transmitter. "Hello, my dear wife," said a familiar voice that made her blood run cold. It was Omar, calling from somewhere that was definitely not a prison. "Amir, where are you?" Madison managed to say, trying to sound confused and concerned rather than terrified. "Ah, Madison, you've always been a terrible actress." Omar laughed with a coldness she had never heard before. "I know you've discovered the truth. I know you were at the American consulate today, and I know you're being followed by a protection team right now." Madison's mind raced. If Omar knew about the operation, it meant he hadn't been arrested as Carmen had said, or that he had escaped, or worse, that there was an informant within the operation. "I have a proposal for you," Omar continued, "and I suggest you listen carefully, because the lives of more people than just yours depend on your next decision." Through the transmitter, Madison could hear Carmen and the team reacting with alarm to Omar's revelations. Clearly, they hadn't expected him to still be free and in communication either. "Do you remember our conversation about family, Madison? How I mentioned that my younger sister was studying in the United States?" Omar paused deliberately. "Well, it turns out that Jessica Taylor, your 28-year-old sister who works as a teacher in Portland, isn't as far away as you think." Madison's blood ran cold. She hadn't mentioned Jessica to Omar during their relationship. The fact that he knew about her sister meant that the investigation into her had been much more thorough than she had imagined. "Leave my sister out of this," Madison said, her voice trembling with anger and fear. "That's entirely up to you," Omar replied calmly. "Jessica is perfectly safe at the moment. She doesn't even know she's being watched, but that could change very quickly based on your actions in the next few hours." Carmen, listening in through the transmitter, immediately began coordinating with teams in the United States to locate and protect Jessica. But Omar seemed to anticipate their every move. "Don't waste your time looking for Jessica in Portland," he said, as if he could hear the team's conversations. "She's closer than you think. In fact, she's here in Dubai. The revelation hit Madison like a bolt of lightning. That's impossible. I spoke to Jessica 3 days ago. She was at home preparing lessons. You spoke to someone you thought was Jessica, Omar corrected. My network is much more sophisticated than your authorities imagine. We have people who can mimic voices, intercept calls, create any reality we need. Madison realized with horror that she had been manipulated on an even deeper level than she had imagined. If Omar could fake phone conversations with her sister, how many other interactions in her life had been orchestrated? What do you want? Madison asked, trying to maintain some control over the situation. Simple, Omar said. You go to an address I'll send to your phone. You go alone, without your protection team. In return, Jessica will be released unharmed, and you can both return home. And if I don't go? Then Jessica becomes a permanent part of our operation in Dubai. She's young, beautiful, and American teachers are highly valued in certain markets. The threat was clear and terrifying. Madison looked around, knowing that her security team was listening to everything, but would probably not be able to act fast enough to save Jessica if she was really in Dubai. You have 1 hour, Omar said. And Madison, if I detect anyone following you, the deal is off. The call ended, and immediately Madison's transmitter crackled with Carmen's voice. Madison, don't go. It's obviously a trap. We're checking on Jessica right now. But before Madison could respond, her phone received a text message. It was a photo of Jessica, clearly taken that day, sitting in a room Madison didn't recognize. Her sister looked confused and frightened, and there was a Dubai newspaper on the table next to her with today's date. They really have her, Madison whispered into the transmitter. The next message contained an address in an industrial area of Dubai and a final warning: come alone or your sister disappears forever. Madison turned off the transmitter despite Carmen's desperate protests. She knew the authorities would do everything to protect her, but she also knew that bureaucracies moved slowly and Jessica didn't have time. The address took her to an isolated warehouse on the outskirts of Dubai. Madison arrived exactly 1 hour after Omar's call. Driving a taxi, she had forced the driver to wait outside. Inside the warehouse, she found a scene that confirmed her worst fears. Jessica was tied to a chair, apparently drugged but conscious. Around her, 3 armed men watched Madison enter. Well done, Madison, Omar said, stepping out of the shadows. Now we can settle this like civilized adults. What Omar didn't know was that Madison had lied about turning off the transmitter. Instead, she had moved it to a different location where it still worked but appeared to be disconnected. The international team had followed the signal and was surrounding the warehouse at that very moment. Free my sister, Madison said firmly. We have a deal. Of course we do, Omar smiled. But first, you need to sign some papers. Final financial transfers, updated powers of attorney. Think of it as divorce paperwork. As Omar spoke, Madison noticed movement in the warehouse's tall windows. The rescue team had arrived. What happened in the next 30 seconds changed everything. Simultaneous explosions at the main and side doors of the warehouse brought in both American and United Arab Emirates tactical teams. Omar and his men were overpowered before they could react. But when the smoke cleared, Madison discovered the final and most shocking truth of all. The woman tied to the chair was not Jessica. It was another victim, an American teacher named Sarah Chen, who had disappeared 3 months earlier. The real Jessica was safe in Portland, completely unaware that her identity had been used for blackmail. Omar had orchestrated the entire final scenario, including the fake photos and even the look-alike, as a last-ditch attempt to escape by using Madison as a hostage to negotiate his freedom. 6 months later, Madison Taylor was back in Los Angeles, rebuilding her life and her business with the most terrifying experience of her life finally behind her. Omar Nazir was sentenced to 25 years in prison for fraud, attempted human trafficking, and kidnapping. His network in Dubai was completely dismantled, freeing 14 women who had been held against their will. Madison never traveled abroad alone again, but she also never again allowed fear to control her life. Instead, she became an advocate for victims of romance fraud, using her experience to educate other women about the warning signs she had ignored. The ultimate irony of the whole story was that Omar had actually been sincere about one thing. Dubai was unforgettable, just not in the way he had promised.